India and Nepal have announced a slew of projects with what Prime Minister Modi calls the hit formula of highways, highways and transways during this visit by Nepal's Prime Minister Prachanda, his first official visit during this tenure. But the question remains, do big brother dynamics, border sensitivities, as well as continuing concerns over China's role still stall India and Nepal's plans from hitting Himalayan heights? Hello and welcome to Worldview at The Hindu with me, Suhasini, Haidar. Now this week we're going to look at, take a close look at one of India's oldest, deepest, but possibly its most complex relationship in many ways with Nepal. As Prime Minister and Communist leader Pushpa Dahal, or Prachanda as he's known, visited Delhi. So why was this visit by the Nepali leader significant? Remember, this was Prachanda's fourth visit as being a Prime Minister of Nepal, the first during this tenure, but this is his third tenure. He's had short tenures in the past from 2008 to 2009 and then 2016 to 2017, cut short each time. Now, apart from the Treaty of Transit we'll tell you about, the two sides also launched 5 projects, 6 MOUs for new projects as well. As a leader of the Maoist movement in Nepal and of the Communist Party, Prachanda was originally seen as close to China. In 2008, he broke with tradition and he made his first trip abroad to Beijing. However, on this particular visit, he made it clear Delhi was the first capital on his visits abroad. So listen in to what he said, and the number of projects, whether it was railways, whether it was roadways, whether it was integrated checkpoints, or of course power transmission, the joint vision for power between the two countries that were announced.
In our meeting today, we discussed the ways to further strengthen cooperation in diverse areas including trade, transit, investment, hydropower development, power trade, irrigation, agriculture, connectivity, including air entry routes, railways, bridge, transmission line, expansion of petroleum pipeline, construction of integrated checkposts, as well as cultural and people-to-people contact.
उस समय मैंने भारत नेपाल संबंधों के लिए एक हीट फार्मूला HIT दिया था। हाईवेज, आईवेज और ट्रांसवेज। मैंने कहा था कि भारत और नेपाल के बीच ऐसे संपर्क स्थापित करेंगे कि हमारे बॉर्डर्स, हमारे बीच बैरियर्स न बने। ट्रक्स की जगह पाइपलाइन से तेल का निर्यात होना चाहिए। साझा नदियों के ऊपर ब्रिज बनाने चाहिए। नेपाल से भारत को बिजली निर्यात करने के लिए सुविधाएं बनाई जानी चाहिए। फ्रेंड्स, आज 9 साल बाद मुझे कहते हुए खुशी है कि हमारी पार्टनरशिप वाकई में हिट है।
And Prime Minister Modi then said, of course, that he still hopes to take this relationship to Himalayan heights. Now, India and Nepal's ties have always been unique for a number of reasons. And I want to make this point because sometimes one doesn't actually look at why relations between two countries are historic or why they have this particular traditional relationship between them, particularly for the kind of neighbors that India and Nepal are. For a landlocked Nepal, India that joins it on 3 sides, remember, they've always seen social, religious and community exchanges, as well as, of course, intermarriages, what used to traditionally be called roti beti ka rishta amongst even the erstwhile royal families on both sides of the border. India is more than 20 times Nepal's size, in fact about 22, yet no country, and India is part of that, has attempted to occupy Nepal or colonize Nepal. It's a largely peaceful border between them of 1,770 kilometers. Now this makes it even more special, particularly after the 1950s treaty. India and Nepal have an open boundary. They give each other citizens near national treatment. So Nepalis are allowed to travel and work in India. Indian rupees are freely used in Nepal as well. The two countries also honor each other's army chiefs as a sort of special military relationship between them. Then India is Nepal's largest trading partner. It's the highest source of foreign direct investment. It provides transit for almost Nepal's entire third country trade, and it's almost 100% of petroleum supplies actually go through Nepal. India is also the third largest source of inward remittances for Nepalis sending money home. This is after Saudi Arabia and Malaysia. So the question remains, if it's all so great, where do the problems lie? Where are the fault lines? And what were some of the issues that didn't get discussed in that expansive meeting between the two leaders? One, India and Nepal have a boundary issue, particularly over areas of Kalapani and Susta. Now, despite an agreement in 2014 to resolve these, officials have barely met even once on the issue. In 2019, India then published a map that showed the contours of Jammu Kashmir. This upset Nepal deeply, as the map seemed to reassert India's claims on Kalapani, on Susta, and other areas at the boundary. Nepal then hit back in 2020 by passing its own map and a constitutional amendment that placed the Nepali version of the map in the national symbol, on its currency, and all official communication. Things got very rough between them. So this time Prime Minister Modi, when speaking, said that the boundary issue would be resolved in the spirit of cooperation, but actually the issue itself didn't make any headway. Another controversy has now arisen after the inauguration of the new parliament in Delhi this week. That includes a mural of India. It includes Nepali areas like Lumbini. Of course, it is a depiction of the past, but there were comments made by certain ministers about how this was India's showing its resolve towards an undivided India. Former Prime Ministers of Nepal, Baburam Bhattarai, KP Sharma Oli, have all raised the issue now. They wanted, in fact, Prime Minister Prachanda to raise it as well, but apparently it didn't come up. Now, a second big issue between them has been that Nepal has long demanded a revision of the 1950 Friendship Treaty between India and Nepal. Nepal has always seen this as an unequal treaty. It wasn't even signed by the leaders of both countries. But despite many promises, India has so far not moved towards talks on this. In particular, the acceptance of an eminent persons group, an EPG report, as it's called, that suggests the changes that should be made to this treaty have not even been accepted by the government. So that treaty the report just languishes unlooked at, and that's been for nearly a decade. Third, in recent years, since Nepal signed an 8-point infrastructure agreement with China, joined the Belt and Road Initiative in 2019. Remember, India has been against the BRI, with a number of Chinese projects coming in, and increased presence of China in its political sphere as well. India has tried to counter these with a slew of its own projects, completing existing plans as well. The government has also put restrictions on purchase of power from hydropower projects in Nepal built or financed by Chinese companies. In contrast, Beijing's role in trying to unite the two communist factions of Prachanda and Oli in 2022, I'm getting past a lot of history here, that failed. India has, in contrast, actually kept a more low profile and more inclusive role in Nepali politics in the past couple of years at least. But even so, India's border trade blockade of 2015 over the Modi government's opposition to Nepal's new constitution still rankles, particularly amongst the Nepali establishment. That became a major breaking point between the two countries that are otherwise so close. Fourth, while the two sides have discussed rail and road connectivity, Nepal has been upset because of a lack of its ability to complete air connectivity. It wants India to allow air access through places like Janakpur, Bhairava, Nepalganj, and Mahendranagar for flights, coming from India, so as to facilitate international flights, particularly those that are coming in from Western Nepal to the two new international airports that Nepal has built at quite a cost in Bhairava and Pokhara. Now, both of these have been built by Chinese companies. It is unviable to use them without this Indian permission. So that's another place where the two have not actually had any kind of discussions or forward movement. I spoke to Nepali author, business consultant and columnist Sujeev Shakya about the importance of Prime Minister Prachanda's visit at this time and what got left unsaid. And I began by asking just how important the visit was and how the slew of projects announced, the transit treaty for power that could take Nepali power to Bangladesh, the inland waterways, have actually been received in Kathmandu.
See, whenever a prime minister goes to India, or even when the kings went to India, you sort of want to get the optics right. as I've been writing. You want things to seem that you have achieved. But what is important is not the announcement, because we keep having these announcements, but there is that sense of mistrust. There's a sense of doubt. So, well, whether these things would actually translate into action and whether something tangible is going to come out, there is still a lot of apprehension. But definitely from what we expected would happen during this trip and what has emerged, I think we can say that okay, it's better than what we would have expected to happen.
Now, Sajeev, Prime Minister Modi, of course, said that borders should not be barriers to the relationship. But just how much are border sensitivities, including this latest row over the Parliament mural in Delhi, seen as the block to India-Nepal ties?
I think it is to a large extent, because I think if we look at from both the sides, whether hanging this new map, the Akhand Bharat map in the Parliament, or the sort of having that pointed map out of Nepal, I think maps and boundaries across South Asia become big tool for political messaging. So it is taken pretty seriously, because I think, and especially in the days of social media, it does attract more eyeballs and more attention than before. But having said that, it is important also to resolve these issues with formally. I have been always of the sort of opinion to say that boundary issues exist with countries practically in every country in the world. So how do you resolve it in an amicable way? And we also have some good precedents of the resolution of the boundary between Bangladesh and India, that is being resolved. We look at discussions are going on formal platforms between resolution of boundary between Bhutan and China. So I think we have to figure out ways of formal mechanisms to resolve these boundary issues rather than making it political rhetoric. And I think in that sense, I think Nepal has also failed over the years of not taking this as a formal issue, but rather continuously leverage this as a political tool. And I think that's going to be very important.
Yes, and of course the two sides have weathered some fairly big storms in the past decade. The blockade of 2015 we were just speaking about, and then the maps and constitutional amendments in 2020. Tell us what you think is really needed for India and Nepal to sidestep these landmines and really make a generational shift for ties.
Yes, I think if we look at the Nepali leadership, it is of a certain age who have their own, lives in the past. And if you look at in India, most of Nepal specialists are people who, have, sort of people who have experience on Nepal, so not necessarily the newer generation. So there is a new India that is emerging, as I've been writing. It's got investments, it's attracting global investments, it's attracting global talents. It has, it's trying to assert itself as a leader of the global South. So how does Nepal understand that? At the same time, in India, people need to look at Nepal, where Nepalis are now in 180 countries, globally mobile, traveling across the world, with the demographics of 70% under 40. So how do we build that? And I think that's one. The other is that the discourse around India-Nepal has always been with the two capitals, and that has been my biggest issue. The discourse has to come down now. It's a federated Nepal. So how does Mithila work with Bihar? Or how does Province 1, Koshi works with Bengal? Or how does Karnali work with Uttarakhand and UP? Those are newer relationships we have to carve out, where discussions are happening between Biratnagar and Calcutta, Biratnagar and Siliguri. It's happening between Surkhet and Simla, or Surkhet and Dehradun. So those are new ways in which we have to perceive these relationships, and also to say that there is a complete shift in how people perceive what is neighborhood, how people perceive your tourism destination. So if you look at young Indians who would want to go to Switzerland, go to Thailand, they don't want to come to Nepal like earlier. And young Nepalis, the same thing. They are not want to go to Delhi or Kolkata. They want to go to another place. So how do we reintroduce the two countries? And both the countries have gone through tremendous transformations in the past 2 decades, and especially with Nepal as a federal democratic republic, 2 elections gone, a new set of people in the parliament, a new sort of voices emerging in politics. So I think it's just more people-to-people interactions. That's where I feel should be the emphasis. The politics will sort of manage itself if there's the foundations of P2P relationship are strong. Because we should not forget that in the 50s, 60s, the politics was equally complicated between India and Nepal. But then the people-to-people relationship, the foundations are very strong. That helped the relationships to continue in a certain manner. And those are the lessons perhaps we need to continuously learn and execute.
And finally, one has to ask how much China is really a factor in India-Nepal ties. Of late, China's reputation seems to have dimmed a little bit, especially after what was seen as political interference in Kathmandu. Is all of that to India's benefit now?
I think China is asserting itself not only in Nepal but throughout the world. It's an investor. It has its own ways of dealing with soft power. It has more tourists going into different countries. So it's a new China. We need to recognize with a leader who has tremendous mandate and is going to stay for a longer period of time, has vision of articulating China's leadership in the world in 2050. So one is we need to understand who is this new China. But especially on Nepal, where there has been interferences, but China has also realized, like other countries, that Nepal has never been very sort of welcoming to foreign investors. So a Chinese investor faces the same issue as a US investor or an Indian investor. And China is an investor per se. Their geopolitics is based on investment, business, trade. And so they have been very disappointed. So we have had, if you look at all the agreements, if you look at, sort of 9 agreements that were signed, the projects under BRI, Nepal has not moved much, like Nepal has not moved much on the Indian project. So as far as China, I see is that as long as the Tibet issue does not flare up, they are not too bothered. They feel India is closer to Nepal to monitor on a day-to-day basis, and India has larger issues at stake. As the Chinese say, Beijing is too far away from Kathmandu. So as long as the Tibet issue does not become a big thing and does not become an irritant, I think China does not want to go beyond. They have tried during the MCC part, they have tried trying to unite the left parties, but they have seen that it's very difficult to work with Nepali politicians because they don't keep their word, as they say, and they find it very difficult to engage.
Sujeev Shakya there, speaking to us from Kathmandu, but of course he's a frequent visitor to India and we'll tell you about his books in just a bit. But let me get you the worldview take on the India-Nepal relationship. While tradition, religion, cross-border marriages powered India-Nepal ties of the past, today's relationship must be powered by trade, infrastructure, power, and energy agreements, as well as working together to build Nepal's capacities in IT, in research and development, and the future, rather than by simply blocking engagement with Chinese projects in Nepal. India can find more inclusive ways to bring about a new generational change in this very close relationship. Talks on revising the 1950 treaty with Nepal in a manner that India has actually been able to do with Bhutan in 2008 would be the first step in showing that commitment. So let me get you the Worldview reading recommendations, and I have quite a few because we have not dealt with this issue as much in the past. The first book right up top, I'd say, is Kathmandu Dilemma, Resetting India-Nepal Ties. It's one of the most comprehensive, modern look at ties between them by former ambassador to Nepal, Ranjit Ray. He was there during some of the most momentous visits by Prime Minister Modi to Nepal in 2014, then the earthquake, then the blockade. So he saw it all close up. So I would really recommend this book. Then 3 books by Sujeev Shakya, actually. The first, Unleashing the Vajra, Nepal's journey between India and China. This is written really looking at the trade of the past, the roots of the past, and now the present. Second book on the same lines, Unleashing Nepal, Past, Present and Future of the Economy. This is purely on Nepal by Sujeev as well. And the pandemic years. These are columns written by Sujeev Shakya in the Kathmandu Post, column called The Other View. That is really worth reading, particularly about the latest events in Nepal. Then there's a book called The Great Game in the Buddhist Himalayas, India and China's quest for strategic dominance. I think I've spoken about this before when it came to Tibet, when it came to Bhutan. This is by Phunchok Stobdan, who's from Ladakh. Another book, very controversial in India, called All Roads Lead North, Nepal's Turn to China by Amish Rajmulmi. He's a Nepali author, but he explains in his book about the choices Nepal is making right now. They're not all committed though. Coping with China-India Rivalry, South Asian Dilemmas. This has been edited by C. Rajamohan and Harnaik Sheikh. Chapters in the book on Nepal by Pramod Jaiswal, and then by really veteran expert on the relationship, S.D. Muni. Well worth reading. This is, of course, a book I've spoken about in the past because I've written a chapter about the India-Bhutan relationship, which might make for very good reading alongside the rest. Then there's India-Nepal Relationship Then and Now by Dr. Krishna Kumari. It looks at the need for the revision of the 1950 treaty, other irritants in the relationship. It's a newer book. It's perhaps not as well edited and published, but it has a lot of information. Then there's a book which is iconic, and it is from 1992. So what you'll be able to see is how far the relationship has progressed, but also how many of the same irritants remain in the relationship. This is also by Professor S.D. Muni, called India-Nepal, A Changing Relationship, as I said, from 1992. Turning to the Maoist rebellion and that period, the revolution, is a book called Lost in Transition, Rebuilding Nepal from the Maoist Mayhem and Mega Earthquake. More up-to-date book by former diplomat Kulchandra Gautam. He's Nepali as well. A book which is an autobiography called Hisila, From Revolutionary to First Lady by Hisila Yami. Remember, she was one of only 2 women in the Communist Party, the Maoist Politburo. She eventually married Baburam Bhattarai, the Prime Minister, who became the Prime Minister of Nepal. He was educated in India, of course, at Jawaharlal Nehru University. Then there's a book called Maoism in India and Nepal by Ranjit Bhushan. While it talks a lot about, of course, Maoist movements inside India, you can see the part about Nepal, and particularly profiles of Prachanda, of Bhattarai, and of former Prime Minister Oli. Then there's a book called Nepal Nexus, the inside account of the Maoists, the Darbar, and New Delhi. So again, on Nepal-India relations, but seen from the Maoist point of view, by Sudhir Sharma from that period. Then a book called Blood Against the Snows, The Tragic Story of Nepal's Royal Dynasty. And of course, we haven't spoken about this part of Nepal's history and what it meant for the India-Nepal relationship, the massacre of the royal family, the relationship with the royal family. This is a book by Jonathan Gregson, and remember, it was written just 1 year after the royal massacre that killed practically the whole family by the man who then became king for just a few days before he passed away as well. And Jonathan Gregson has also written a book which came out around the same time, which I really do recommend, called Kingdoms Beyond the Clouds, Journeys in Search of the Himalayan countries. And this is particularly interesting. It looks at Nepal and it looks at Bhutan, and it's a travel book in many ways, but a very interesting look at traditions as well as history and the present. So we hope you enjoy reading all of these books, really immerse yourself in this neighboring country, and join us again here on Worldview. Please also do like and subscribe to the Hindu channel on YouTube, or watch us on our website www.thehindu.com. From the team here, thanks for watching.